In this video, we will be discussing the topic of climate change. What is it? How does it affect us? And what can we do about it? Let's dive right into it with the question, what is climate change? Climate change is defined as a change in global or regional climate patterns, in particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards and attributed largely to the increased level of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by fossil fuels. Let me explain. Humans and other living organisms breathe in air and produce carbon dioxide, or CO2. This is called cellular respiration, and it has the equation of C6H12O6 plus 6O2, which turns into 6CO2 plus 6H2O. This basically means that glucose and oxygen are being turned into carbon dioxide and water. Eventually, the CO2 is collected by plants that use it in a process called photosynthesis. This is the exact reverse of cellular respiration, where it turns carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. It is a beautiful ongoing system, or at least it was, until man got smart and made machines. Machines such as planes, trains, and automobiles that cause the balance to shift, with even more gas being pushed into the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and methane. It's worth mentioning that carbon dioxide levels in the air are at the highest in 650,000 years, at 416 parts per million. The gases that I just listed are known as greenhouse gases, and are responsible for what we call the greenhouse effect. Normally, solar rays go through the atmosphere and touch the Earth. Some are absorbed, and some stay trapped in our atmosphere, while the rest of them leave our atmosphere. This leaves us with a nice planet to live on. The greenhouse effect amplifies that, with solar rays going through our atmosphere and hitting the ground. Some are absorbed, and others leave, but the rest is now more likely to reflect down to Earth due to the increased amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This causes the Earth to warm, and leaves us with some terrible messes to clean up. Since 1880, the global temperature has risen 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit. This brings me to my second question. How does it affect us? Like I said before, the trapped solar rays cause the Earth to warm. This is not only harmful to the air, but also the ocean. The oceans and forests all over the world are considered to be what are called carbon sinks. They like to absorb a lot of carbon. Now you may be thinking, how does this affect us? Well, if you haven't noticed, the past couple of years haven't been the greatest. This is mainly due to climate change. Forest fires all over the world are caused by the warming of our atmosphere, which in turn also release a large amount of carbon into the atmosphere as well, due to them being carbon sinks. This decreases the amount of oxygen producing organisms and increases the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Our oceans are far from being out of harm's way. The greenhouse effect warms the ocean, while the CO2 in the ocean reacts with the water in a process called ocean acidification. This reaction causes the water to become more acidic, which is not a good sign for coral. Rising temperatures and ocean acidification is a double whammy when it comes to coral. When the temperature gets too high, the coral starts to get rid of the algae that's helping it produce the energy that it needs so it can build and stay alive. This is what causes the phenomenon called coral bleaching. Now at this point, they're not dead, but they are dying. Once the algae that helps the coral leaves, the acidic water starts to dissolve the outer shell of the coral and causes it to stop building upon itself. This destruction of coral reefs really affects us, due to many organisms living in the coral reefs that we consume. Smaller organisms in the reefs are eaten by bigger organisms that we then catch and then consume ourselves. With no coral reefs, there may be less fish for us to eat, which will greatly impact our health. Here's a picture of 4 potted plants numbered from 1 to 4, according to how much vinegar would be put into their water. 1 has pure water, and 4 has the most vinegar. Water acidification really does matter when it comes to plant life. I have just scratched the surface when it comes to the effects of climate change. Do you recall that recent snowstorm that messed with Texas? That is also due to climate change and the melting ice caps that contain something called the polar vortex. With less ice to contain it, it was able to reach out across the entire United States. This brings me to my final question. What can we do about it? The easy answer is to stop burning fossil fuels for energy. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have alternatives called clean energy. The four types of clean energy are solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear. Solar power uses energy from the sun to provide electricity. Wind is used by building wind turbines to generate electricity. Hydro is used by many hydroelectric dams that use the flow of water to turn turbines, which then produce electricity. Finally, there's nuclear. You must be thinking, nuclear? What? You mean the stuff they make bombs out of? No. In a nuclear power plant, uranium-235 is surrounded by water. The uranium atoms are bombarded with neutrons that cause the atoms to split and shoot out with more neutrons. This causes a chain reaction that warms up the water, creating steam. This reaction is controlled by a moderator. The steam then moves to a turbine that produces electricity. Normally, when people think of nuclear power, they think of an atomic bomb. But a nuclear power plant is not an atomic bomb, because atomic bombs have uncontrolled chain reactions that are calculated by their critical masses. Now you may be thinking about the terrible accidents of Chernobyl and Fukushima. The reason these terrible accidents happened is because of the people who were running them relying on old and outdated technology. It was not stable enough to handle nuclear power. That is like trying to run your favorite video game on a 1960s computer. There are new technologies that make it a lot safer now. Clean energy isn't the only solution to climate change. You can donate to charities that are helping to replant the forests and other plant life, such as Team Trees, where every dollar equals one tree planted, and Wooden Journey, whose goal is to conserve the rainforest of the world. Also, recycling never hurts anyone. Since the plastic is in the ocean and in the ground, it's leaching chemicals. It's better to recycle a little bit than to not do it at all.